It's 7 p.m. Friday, April 5th here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. A wildfire that broke out in Gangwon-do Province overnight consumes more than 500 hectares of forest while burning hundreds of houses and buildings. The worst forest fire in Korea's history kills one and leaves more than 100 without homes.
President Moon Jaein visits the scene to console evacuees now sheltering in a nearby elementary school. The president also calls for a swift review of designating the region as a special disaster zone.
The largest fire broke out in Gosong and Sokcho, but multiple other fires broke out simultaneously in the same region of Gangwon-do Province. While exact causes are yet to be announced, we look into the possible reasons.
And bad news for Samsung Electronics. Its first quarter operating profit falls 60% on year, the biggest drop in 4 years. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Hello and welcome to Arirang NEWSCENTER. I'm Han-daeun in Seoul.
And I'm Do-adam. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. Now we begin with the massive wildfire in Korea's northeastern Gangwon-do Province. The main fire in the provinces Gosong and Sokcho have been completely put out this evening, some 17 hours after the fire broke out.
But authorities are continuing to work against the clock to put out smaller blazes while making sure that the flames won't be reignited tonight. For more, let's go over to our Won Jung-hwan, who is in Gosong. Jung-hwan, tell us more.
Hey, a massive fire have roared along the eastern coast of the country. And now I'm here right now at the elementary school near the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters in Gosong, where a provisional shelter have been prepared for those who have been affected. As you can see, there are tents and food for them. More than 3,000 people were forced from their homes last night, but because the main fire has been completely put out here in the Gosong area, there are fewer than 100 people now at the shelter. To update you briefly about the fire, overnight, it spread to 18 different sites, burning more than 500 hectares of area so far and destroying at least 300 houses and buildings. The authorities are trying to figure out the exact cause of the fire, but as far as we know right now, it might have been a spark from electrical wires. The fire quickly spread throughout the region, fanned by strong winds and dry air, affecting Gosong, where I am, as well as Inje, Sokcho, and Gangneung. The main fire near Gosong and Sokcho was put out around 9:40 in the morning, and more than 80% of fire in Inje has been extinguished. And just a few hours ago, the Gangneung area, where firefighters had some trouble, they've managed to extinguish it all there too.
Now, Jung-hwan, it must be a very frightening experience for everyone there. Can we expect the fire to be completely contained by tonight?
Yes, the fire in the Gangwon-do Province is likely to be put out completely by the end of today, as the country has deployed its biggest ever firefighting force to the region and they're working hard on it. More than 870 fire trucks and some 13,000 firefighters are there. It's been a nationwide mission. The headquarters of all major regions have sent fire trucks. Specifically, half of the available forces of Seoul, Incheon, Daejeon, Gyeonggi-do Province, and other regions, and a third of the forces of Busan, Ulsan, South Korea-U.S Province, and other areas. While the fire agency lowered one level now, earlier today they've issued a top-level alert, which is for fires that affect the entire nation, reflecting the seriousness of the situation. But we have to keep watching because the fires that are left out could still grow again. Also, the landscape in Inje is hilly and mountainous, so it could take time for the firefighters to access the sites. The top priority for the force is to put out all the fires before the sun goes down, because the strong wind at night could make all their efforts so far for nothing. That's all for me.
Jung-hwan, let's hope that the winds won't pick up speed tonight. Thank you for that report. Be safe and keep us posted. The worst wildfire in Korea's history has claimed one life while forcing hundreds to stay in temporary shelters. It has also destroyed hundreds of homes, buildings, and public facilities. For the latest on Gangwon fire aftermath, let's connect with our Seo Bo-bin standing by in Gangneung. Bo-bin?
Hi, Jae-in. I'm still out in Gangneung, Gangwon-do Province. As you can see behind me, there are some remains of some of the houses that were burned by the fire. But as of right now, more than 90% of fire in Gangneung has been extinguished. But there's still some last-minute work that needs to be done so that the fire doesn't restart overnight. Since the fire first hit Gangneung last night, more than 120 hectares of forest have been burned, plus more than 120 houses have been destroyed, and some 59 mobile base stations were burnt. Casualties stand at 1 dead and 1 injured. In Gangneung and the East Coast area itself, more than 400 people were evacuated and about 70 people were moved to shelters earlier in the day, but right now only a few are left. This is Korea's biggest ever wildfire, so people are stunned. Take a listen.
I got a message saying there's a fire in Inje, and I started to get phone calls from my family who were worried. I heard neighbors yelling, saying to come outside, and I saw red flames all over the mountain, so I had to get out.
I got a message last night at around 7 p.m. At 8 p.m., I got a message telling me to evacuate. This morning, I came back home and saw my house had burned down, so I had to come to the shelter.
I work as a forest fire observer, and yesterday after work, I got a message saying there was fire in the area where I work. The fire got so big that I had to leave my house without taking anything. It's just too much to bear.
The military is working hard to make sure that the fire is completely extinguished. Then the total damage will be clear once all that is done. Tan.
Well, it must have been a total nightmare for the residents there. Let's hope that everything gets restored as soon as possible. Thank you for that update, Bo-bin. Be safe out there. The president and the prime minister both visited the scene this afternoon, meeting face-to-face with those left without homes and those who worked against the clock to contain the blaze. President Moon Jaein also called for a swift review to name the region a special disaster zone. Shin Se-min with more.
President Moon Jaein made a surprise trip to the eastern city of Gosong to show directly his support for the locals. Just hours earlier, he had ordered the government to review designating parts of Gangwon-do Province as special disaster zones, which would allow the government to provide special support. The president had been closely watching the situation since last night, even calling off a public appearance related to Arbor Day. Earlier, Moon attended emergency meetings where he ordered officials to devote all their resources to getting the wildfire contained.
특히 진화 과정에서 진화 작업에 동원되는 소방관 등에게 안전사고가 발생하지 않도록 각별히 유의해 주시기 바랍니다. 각 지자체가 중심이 되어서 인명피해가 발생하지 않도록 산불이 번질 지역이 있는 지역은 주민 대피 등 적극적이고 선제적인 조치를 취해 주시기 바랍니다.
Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon has been at the scene since early Friday morning, shortly after he held an emergency meeting with related ministries. The South Korean government set up the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters and declared a national state of emergency to more quickly mobilize state resources needed to fight and contain the blaze. Those living in the region will also be entitled to special government support. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, spring is usually when wildfires easily start, and the eastern Gangwon-do Province is particularly vulnerable to fires due to the region's natural environment. Lee Min-sun explains.
The fire that started last night in Gosong County spread quickly overnight to other nearby parts of Gangwon-do Province, assisted by a strong wind with gusts of up to 20 meters per second. While the fire authorities are still investigating the cause of the fire and why it spread so fast, some topographical and seasonal factors seem to have contributed to its spread. Fires can easily occur during the warm, dry spring season. Most previous large fires in Gangwon-do Province occurred in the springtime. The fire that burnt down the Naksansa Temple in Yangyang County in 2005 and the 8-day-long fire that started in Gosong County in 2000 both happened in April. Gangwon-do Province's mountainous landscape also creates a suitable environment for fires to spread. The easterly wind passing across the mountains creates the fan effect, which causes a warm, dry wind on the western slopes of the mountain range.
Because it's a mountainous area, air currents over the Taebaek mountain range turn into strong winds, raising the possibility of wildfire. Also, there are a lot of pine trees there, which are especially vulnerable to fire with their pine resin.
With the strong wind dying out, fire authorities have successfully controlled the main fire and are keeping a lookout for possible remaining embers. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Now, local authorities are working around the clock to put out the devastating fire. It has also notified North Korea for possible cooperation. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The Korea Forest Service said Friday evening that the government has dispatched more than 50 helicopters and around 13,700 officials, including those from the National Fire Agency, the Korean National Police Agency, and nearby municipal governments to help extinguish the fire in Gosong, Sokcho, Gangneung, Donghae, and Inje, cities along the country's east coast. The National Fire Agency said it has mobilized more than 870 fire trucks from across the nation, which is the highest number of trucks it has ever deployed in a single day. Seoul's Unification Ministry has also mobilized personnel as the wildfire is located near the border with North Korea. Ministry officials say they've already shared information about the fire with the North on Friday through the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, conveying the need for possible cooperation.
We are going to share information on the wildfire with North Korean officials and express the need for possible inter-Korean cooperation. We will keep an eye on the situation to decide whether we should work together with the North.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of National Defense says it has also deployed more than 7,000 soldiers and a combined 35 military aircraft as of Friday evening to help in efforts to extinguish the fire and restore affected areas. In addition, 13,000 soldiers are standing by. The Defense Ministry also said it is deploying some 6,800 meals for displaced residents. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, as we heard before in an earlier report, several weather factors have contributed to the forest fire in Gangwon-do Province. Let's get the latest from the Weather Center with our Michelle Park. Michelle, what is the latest?
The wind has weakened since this morning, and as of 6 p.m. Korea time, the wind alerts have all been lifted now. However, over on the east coast regions of Gangwon-do Province, where the devastating fires occurred, authorities are on high alert as strong northwesterly winds of 7 to 12 meters per second are still expected. Now, also a dry weather advisory is still in place across the nation, while the alerts have been upgraded to warning over in the east coast. Now, these are the two factors that have contributed to the magnitude of the recent fire, so extra precautions are needed at this hour to avoid further damage. And fortunately, rain is in store for the weekend, but it won't be relieving the dry conditions completely, as the amount of precipitation is expected to be less than 5 millimeters.
In other news, President Moon's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong held a meeting today on the summit meeting with the U.S. president coming up next week. The National Security Council this afternoon reviewed the preparations going into what would be the 7th summit meeting between the two presidents and discussed South Korea's role in carrying forward the peace drive on the Korean peninsula. The council members said they will do their best for next week's summit because it could lead to President Trump meeting again with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The National Assembly has ratified a deal with the U.S. on sharing defense costs. Under the agreement approved Friday, Seoul will contribute roughly $915 million this year to help cover the expense of stationing American troops on the peninsula. The new deal only covers 2019, and Seoul's share is up 8.2% from the year before. Rival lawmakers also passed over 100 pending bills, including a revision to the National Assembly Assembly law that will require Parliament standing committees to deliberate on bills on a regular basis. The revision comes amid criticism that the National Assembly is unproductive, especially at times of political tension. Also passed was a resolution urging Japan to correct its school textbooks that had made false claims about Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo. There's been speculation that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might visit Russia in the next few months. In the meantime, Russia and the U.S. have held their own meeting on North Korea issues. Our Lee Ji-won with more.
U.S. Ambassador to Russia Jon Huntsman and Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov met on Wednesday, where they discussed coordination of efforts to resolve the Korean Peninsula issues. Russia's foreign ministry announced a meeting but did not give any more details on the specific agenda. Their meeting comes at the request of Washington's diplomat amid growing speculation about a possible Pyongyang-Moscow summit. Ever since Hanoi, North Korea and Russia have been increasing their exchanges, with officials traveling between the countries, including North Korean Protocol Chief Kim Chang-sun's visit to Moscow last month. It's expected that Ambassador Huntsman was updated on the details of a possible Kim-Putin summit, while also seeking Russia's cooperation in helping Washington resume denuclearization talks with the North. The two sides have been at a standstill since the Hanoi summit collapsed in February, with North Korea wanting a phased dismantlement of its nuclear program in exchange for the partial removal of sanctions at each step, while the U.S. is asking Pyongyang to take concrete denuclearization steps and provide an overall roadmap in exchange for sanctions relief. Now another Washington-Moscow meeting is coming up, as Deputy Foreign Minister Morgulov announced that Washington's nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun will be visiting the country sometime in April. This is a reciprocal visit to Morgulov's trip to Washington in late January. During his meetings with counterparts from around the world after the Hanoi summit, Biegun has been stressing the need for the international community to continue implementing sanctions on the North. But with U.S. President Donald Trump repeatedly softening his tone on new sanctions on the regime, it remains to be seen if Biegun will push the need for sanctions and pressure when he meets Morgulov later this month. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's two tech giants, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, have released their preliminary earnings guidance reports today, and both firms saw profits fall compared to the first quarter of the previous year. Our Kim Hae-sung reports.
Samsung Electronics says its first quarter operating profit fell 60% on year, its biggest drop in operating profit in 4 years. According to the company's preliminary results released Friday, operating income for the January to March period slid to $5.5 billion. Sales fell 14% on year to around $46 billion. The announcement comes after the tech giant had issued a warning last month that its earnings would be lower than market expectations, citing falling chip prices and lower demand for its display panels. Samsung saw record sales and profits last year, but falling global demand for memory chips on weakening demand from China and data center companies like Amazon and Microsoft has hurt its profits.
Slowing growth in China is weighing on Samsung's exports of chips and smartphones. Chip prices have also fallen sharply, further hurting Samsung's profits. This trend is likely to continue until at least the second quarter, but a possible resolution to the U.S.-China trade spat or expansion of fiscal spending by Beijing could lift chip demand in the latter half of this year.
For its display division, Samsung had said that LCD panel prices fell more than expected due to an expansion in capacity from Chinese firms, while demand from its flexible OLED display screens used for iPhones also declined. LG Electronics also saw its first quarter operating profits down by 19% on year to $792 million. But its performance compared to the previous quarter is up 11-fold. Sales fell 1.4% on year to $13 billion. Analysts said LG's smartphone business and intensifying price competition in the global TV market largely weighed on earnings, while sales of home appliances like fridges and air purifiers helped boost its profits. Both Samsung and LG Electronics will disclose the full earnings data of their own first quarter operations later this month. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
The massive wildfire in Gangwon-do Province has burned more than 500 hectares of forest. But ironically, today, April 5th, is Arbor Day in South Korea, a day set to promote forestation. The South Korean government is doing its part by helping to create greener landscapes in Mongolia. Our Choi Si-young explains what the government is doing and why.
Planting trees to reduce the concentration of yellow dust in Mongolia's vast central deserts to prevent that dust blowing to South Korea and darkening the sky. That's what the Korea International Cooperation Agency aims to achieve through its forestation projects in Mongolia. Yellow dust is made up of dry soil particles blown over from Mongolia and northern China to South Korea. South Korea's weather agency says that between 2002 and 2014, out of the 114 sandstorms that hit the Korean peninsula, 92 originated from Mongolia.
Almost 78% of Mongolia's landmass is desert, which negatively affects South Korea due to the yellow dust that it produces. To reduce the amount of dust particles blowing in, we think forestation in Mongolia is necessary.
Since December last year, the South Korean government, joined by a local NGO, Green Asia Network, has been planting trees in central Mongolia to prevent further desertification. The goal is to plant around 100,000 trees. The South Korean government says the forestation projects help people in Mongolia too, because locals will also benefit from cleaner air and they can sell fruit produced by the trees, creating a new source of income. The agency plans to run the forestation projects until 2021 and expand them to help other countries struggling with similar issues. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Competition is heating up among Korea's mobile carriers with Samsung's launch today of its Galaxy S10 5G phone. SK Telecom has drastically increased the new phone discounts it gives to its subscribers from 320,000 Korean won to just over 540,000. Its competitor LG U+ had raised its subsidies just hours earlier. Some say, though, that by doing that, they might be at risk of breaking the law. The other main carrier, KT, says it has no plans to adjust its discounts. North Korea has joined the UN Convention on Contracts for International Sales of Goods, an unusual move considering the regime is under heavy sanctions. The North is the 90th state to join the convention, with its membership to start a year from now. The convention provides a standard set of rights and obligations for buyers and sellers. Pundits say this could be Pyongyang preparing for the sanctions to be eventually lifted. From July, patients will spend less money on beds at small hospitals. The health ministry says it will extend coverage by shouldering 40% of the cost for patients to stay in a 2-bed ward and 30% for a 3-bed ward. Currently, only wards with 4 or more beds in small hospitals are covered by the state insurance. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has finalized his divorce, and in the settlement, he's keeping 75% of the couple's Amazon stock. He's also keeping a stake in the Washington Post and a private space travel company. His now ex-wife, Mackenzie, will become one of the 5 richest women in the world in her own right. She will own 4% of Amazon, worth around $35.5 billion. The 25-year-old marriage came to an end after Bezos was found to have had an affair with a former TV host. That's your 3-minute news flash. News in depth coming up next.
With only 1 week left until what may become another historic summit between leaders of South Korea and the U.S., much attention is being drawn to the summit agenda. And the agenda is likely to be prearranged by now, as South Korea's top diplomats and nuclear envoys have returned home after holding a series of talks with their U.S. counterparts. Today, we discuss in depth on the possible Seoul-Washington summit agenda and future perspectives on resolving North Korea's nuclear issue. For that, Dr. Woo Jung-yup of Sejong Institute now joins us in the studio. Good to have you with us, Dr. Woo.
Thanks for having me today.
So the Deputy Chief of Seoul's National Security Office, Kim Hyun-jong, has returned following his talks with his U.S. counterpart, who is a U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor Charles Cooperman. Upon his arrival at the airport, Kim has stated that Seoul and Washington are on the same page with regards to the ultimate destination or roadmap in nuclear negotiations. How do you interpret his remarks?
So I think that there has been concerns raised from the media that there might be some differences with regard to the final destination of this denuclearization process of North Korea, because United States have been very firm on their stance in terms of achieving the CVID or FFVD. But South Korean government has not been strongly articulate that is our goal, even though our government position has been following that international community's goal of denuclearization of North Korea because of North Korea's hesitance to negotiating with the international community on the term of achieving CVID or FFVD. So since the breakdown of the Hanoi, that's why there was a concerns raised among the media about the differences between the United States and the South Korea. And Mr. Kim yesterday mentioned was to dispel that kind of misbelief among the public and the media that there is difference between United States and South Korea. And our president, Moon Jae-in himself mentioned that achieving the achieving the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization is our goal. So there might be some difference how to achieve that goal, but since, as Mr. Kim mentioned, that there's no difference, I guess, from two governments.
So they do share the ultimate goal, which is North Korea's denuclearization. Now, Kim Hyun-jong has brushed off concerns on Seoul-Washington's disharmony, like you said. He said that talks went very well and good results are expected from the Moon-Trump summit. Do you think the same positive atmosphere is now prevailing in Washington as well?
There's a saying within Washington that the summit between two leaders from South Korea and the U.S. is necessary this time because they also want to dispel that kind of misbelief among the public about the differences between two allies. So I think that it is fairly positive from the U.S. side that holding the summit next week is very important for continuing to have good relations between two countries. Maybe we need to talk more in detail about how to achieve the denuclearization of North Korea. Also, there are some differences in burden sharing, trade issues. But as an allied countries for more than 65 years, I think the two countries can solve out peacefully and in harmony.
I really hope so too. South Korea's top security chief, Chung Eui-yong, recently stated that the government is mulling to send an envoy to North Korea. Do you think the government would possibly send the envoy before the Moon-Trump summit? And if they really do send an envoy, regardless of the timing, what would the envoy talk about with his or her North Korean counterpart?
So after Hanoi, President Trump made a phone call to President Moon Jae-in to talk to Kim Jong-un, and maybe he wanted to deliver some message to Kim Jong-un via our President Moon Jae-in, and he also expects that some kind of message can be delivered through President Moon Jae-in. That is our government role as a facilitator. So I think that our government has tried to reach out to North Korea before the summit, but apparently that, as Mr. Chung Eui-yong mentioned in National Assembly yesterday, that there is no positive response yet from North Korea because they might need more time to review what went wrong at Hanoi. So I think that it might be difficult or it's unlikely that we can send a special envoy before the summit, but I think that doors are still open and there's still a window of time that we can send because you can just go up and meet the North Korean counterpart. Right. So I think that if we can meet any high-level officials from North Korea with regard to the denuclearization or other issues pending on the Korean Peninsula, it might help President Moon's position in negotiate with the President Trump this time. But even though we don't have summit before the summit on April 11th, I think it's still fine because everyone knows that North Korea might need more time to review their own process.
Now, diplomatic efforts are continuing to resolve this North Korea's nuclear issue. But interesting fact is that the efforts recently are mostly top-down in top-down approach, summits first, and then follow-up measures or meetings later. Now, do you think the part of the main goals of this Moon-Trump summit is to open doors to inter-Korean summit as well as a North Korea-U.S. summit?
I think it is generally agreed within the U.S. that top-down approach is necessary when you deal with North Korea because of North Korea's very unique government structures and the governing system that no other person but Chairman Kim can discuss the denuclearization process of their country. So United States have been saying that it might be great if they can have very meaningful working level negotiations before they have summit between two leaders. But because of North Korea's very unique governing structure, it is inevitable that the United States has to have a summit to continue to have a discussion on the denuclearization front. So I think that now the structure of the negotiation between U.S. and North Korea is made at the leaders level that I think it might be necessary for Korea and the U.S. to discuss at the presidential level to discuss the North Korean issues because not many people can be accessing the information that they have because most important talks are between the leaders these days. So I think that it's different from the traditional approaches and traditional diplomatic styles. But I think the U.S. realized that it is necessary at this juncture that you have to talk to Chairman Kim Jong-un himself.
So there are quite solid reasons behind this top-down approach. Now, Washington looked quite, it looked quite confusing in terms of its North Korea policy, with President Trump showing disharmony with top North Korea negotiators in Washington. But Secretary of State Pompeo recently stated that he hopes for a third North Korea-U.S. summit within a few months. Does this mean that U.S. and North Korea strategy now became a bit clearer? Because that statement coming from Pompeo sounds a bit stronger than what he used to say before.
I think the U.S. has continued to have this stance on the negotiation. So they think that engagement is necessary. But at the same time that they say that they have to keep the sanctions intact because they believe that sanction is the only way to get North Korea to the negotiation. That is why they say both engagement and keeping the sanction at the same time. So in the past, when you say engagement, they usually lower the pressure on the sanctions. And if you heighten the pressure on the sanctions, they usually don't talk about engagement. So that is why it is somewhat confusing to the general public because United States is saying engagement and keeping sanctions at the same time. But as I just mentioned that U.S. believe that North Korea needs more time to review their decision-making process. So I think the United States is sending the message to North Korea that it might be better, it might be in North Korea's interest to come back to the table at the earlier stage because if time goes by too long, then it might be difficult for North Korea to come back with a negotiation position as before. So I think that United States is sending the message that it's in North Korea's interest to come back to the negotiation earlier, but at the same time, it also sends the message that U.S. is going to keep the sanctions as is.
Now, what other issues do you expect to be brought to the table during the Moon-Trump summit? For instance, the defense sharing cost. Today, Korea's National Assembly ratified a deal with the U.S. on sharing the defense costs, and Seoul will contribute roughly $915 million this year to help cover the expense of stationing U.S. troops on the peninsula. What other issues do you think will be brought to the table at the summit?
So the burden sharing that is ratified at the National Assembly today was just a one-year deal. That means that right after we had a ratification at the National Assembly, we might need to start another negotiation for 2020. So United States has not confirmed yet what kind of formula that they want from the future burden sharing between the United States and South Korea. And some said in the United States that it's going to be like cost plus 50%, which acting Defense Secretary Shanahan denied at their Congress, but he also mentioned that fair share should be given by the hosting countries. So we had these challenges, and since President Trump is very keen on this issue, that it is safe to expect that he's going to mention this issue. And at the same time, that there's, from the U.S. point of view, they need better Korea-Japan relations. So probably United States is going to emphasize the trilateral security cooperation between Korea, U.S., and Japan, and which is not comfortable issue for South Korea. And also trade issue is going to be brought up. So like a tariff on the cars and the steels are still pending. So I think that it is very important that President Moon persuade President Trump that like tariff on cars or steel is not good for, not beneficial mutually for United States and South Korea.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un remains silent, but he recently visited the Samjeong County, which is a place known to, which Kim Jong-un is known to visit every time he needs to make a major political decision. What are some of the implications of his visit there? So
there's going to be their most important committee meeting next week, which is April 11th. At 11th in North Korea. So I think this kind of like visit is some implications that he's going to change something with regard to their constitution or his nominal position, because he is the head of the country, but the nominal head of the North Korea is a different person. Right. It's a Kim Young-sun. So I think that they might change something in their constitution or governing system. So to make that kind of like important changes in their governing system, that is why Kim Jong-un might visit that county to make some implications that there is going to be something next week.
Now, Kim Jong-un's post-Hanoi strategy, or should I say North Korea's post-Hanoi strategy, is yet to be announced. What kind of strategy do you expect from the North? But I do have to mention, I know this is a big question to ask, but we only have about 30 seconds. So United States has very firm on their demand to North Korea. So I think now North Korea's choice is whether to accept or going to make another proposal to the United States. So I think that since Kim Jong-un himself only can make a decision in North Korea, I think he needs more time to to think on what kind of strategy is best achieving his goal of leading his country. So I think maybe Kim Jong-un himself does not know what's the best strategy right now. So he may not be quite ready yet. All right, Dr. Hu, thank you so much for your insights today. Thank you. It is now time to take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's website and other social media platforms. And we have another episode of Onni News today, where our Yoon Jung-min looks at the latest social trends in Korea. Take a look.
Hi everyone, I'm Yoon Jung-min, a news reporter at Arirang TV, and welcome to Onni News. Thank God it's Friday, but you know what? It's no ordinary Friday here. Every year on April 5th, South Korea celebrates the Arbor Day, or the tree planting day. Recently, local researchers have found out through a study that indoor plants such as money trees or spear flowers improve air quality by reducing fine dust concentrations. On the back of these findings, Sales of these plants grew by 136% on-year on a local online market around the end of March. They expect more demand in April, particularly around the Arbor Day. That's not all. Seems like some of the K-pop fans are also up for it. A few years ago, Chinese fans of K-pop group Shinhwa raised funds to plant trees and build Shinhwa Forest around April, hoping for cleaner air for their stars. Some of the other fan clubs, including Girls' Generation and EXO, have also raised funds for the same purpose. Well, be that as it may, it's still good to see more greenery in neighborhoods. Getting bored of beeping alarms in the morning? Well, I might just jump out of bed in a second if my super fairy star wakes me up in the morning. Well, in fact, if you are a Samsung Galaxy user, this may no longer be just imagination. Samsung's mobile app Celeb Alarm, which provides voice alarms and voice messages of K-pop stars, was only available for Samsung Galaxy S10 users, but now the service is expanded for some of other model users too. Currently, more than 100 voice messages from 10 stars are available, including Kang Dan-ye, Chaunu of Astro, Jongun-ji and Son Na-eun of A-Pink. Also, the service was launched in 10 Asian countries, including China, Japan, and Vietnam. Of course, it's not free and you need a subscription, but some of the K-pop fans might welcome the news. What was the best scene at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics for you? For me, friendship between South Korea's skier Lee Sang-hwa and Japan's Naoko Daira was impressive thanks to their warm hug after the race. In the women's 500 meters, Daira took gold while Lee was just 0.39 seconds behind her rival. Lee shed tears after the race and Daira gave her a big hug on the ice. The two were seen by many sports fans and media. To honor their friendship, a legacy foundation for Pyeongchang 2018 is likely to award them the Korea-Japan Friendship Award for showing true Olympic spirit. The foundation leader appreciated them, portraying their friendship as an ideal spirit among athletes. Maybe true sportsmanship lies in friendship rather than competition. That's all we have for today, but there is another Unni next time, so don't forget to subscribe to A+ and like this video. Bye!
With continuous fire incidents occurring in the nation, we are in desperate need of rain.
Yes, and I hear there is some showers on the way. For the latest update on the weather, let's turn again to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for us. Michelle.
Yes, the nation will be under cloudy skies on Saturday during the afternoon with some occasional showers. Now, the rain will focus on the central region and down south by Sunday. At the same time, though, Beijing and Tokyo will stay under clear skies. But the rain will relieve the dry conditions completely as most of the regions will only receive a small amount of rain of between 5 and 10 millimeters, while the eastern regions will receive even less. Going over to our readings for tomorrow, the morning in Seoul will begin at 5 degrees Celsius and warmer as we move down the southern regions. And Seoul's daily high will be a few notches lower than today at 14 degrees, while Daegu and Gyeongju rises into the 20s. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that does wrap it up for us on this edition of Arirang News, and we do hope that those in Gangwon-do Province do fight through the forest fires, and hopefully the situation will be resolved as soon as possible.
We all hope that the winds won't pick up speed today, so even the small blazes won't be reignited. All right, thank you as always for watching.